In early June 1967, the Middle East stood on the edge of a silence so tense it felt like breath held too long. Then, in just 6 days, that silence exploded. Borders were redrawn, armies collapsed and regrouped, millions of lives were placed under new rule, without warning, without consent. The conflict became known as the 6-Day War. But the name is deceptive, because while the fighting lasted less than a week, its roots stretched back decades, and its consequences still shape the world today. This was not a sudden war, it was not an accident, and it was not inevitable. It was the result of unresolved trauma, competing national dreams, regional power struggles, and global pressure slowly tightening like a coil. This story does not judge, it does not assign blame. It seeks to explain how this war came to happen, why it unfolded so fast, and why its aftermath never truly ended. To understand the 6-Day War, we must begin long before the first jet took off on June 5, 1967. In 1948, the Middle East was already at war. The Arab-Israeli War ended not with peace, but with armistice agreements, ceasefires, not treaties. Israel emerged as a recognized state, but its borders were fragile lines drawn by military reality rather than international consensus. Around it, the region fractured. Egypt administered the Gaza Strip. Jordan annexed the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Syria held high ground overlooking northern Israel. No Arab state formally recognized Israel's legitimacy, and no lasting solution was found for the Palestinians displaced by the war. Hundreds of thousands became refugees, living in camps across Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Their displacement was not temporary, it became permanent. Between 1949 and 1967, the region existed in a state that was neither war nor peace. Border clashes flared. Raids provoked reprisals. Diplomacy barely existed. This was a ceasefire world, quiet on the surface, volatile beneath. A future war was not planned, but it was always possible. In the 1950s and 1960s, a powerful force swept the Arab world, Arab nationalism. At its center stood Gamal Abdel Nasser, the charismatic president of Egypt. Nasser preached unity, resistance to Western influence, and rejection of Israel's existence. To millions, he was a symbol of dignity after colonialism. To Israel, he represented an existential threat. Egypt became the military and ideological heart of Arab resistance, armed increasingly with Soviet weapons, though officially non-aligned. Israel, meanwhile, aligned itself with Western powers, first France, later the United States, seeking security through deterrence. Syria took an even harder line. From the Golan Heights, Syrian artillery shelled Israeli farmland below. Palestinian guerrilla groups launched raids with Syrian support. Israel responded with force. Each retaliation bred the next escalation. The cycle tightened, the rhetoric sharpened, the margin for error shrank. The Middle East was not isolated from the world. It sat at the crossroads of it. Oil routes, trade corridors, symbolic influence in the post-colonial era. The Cold War loomed over every decision. The Soviet Union armed Egypt and Syria. Western powers increasingly saw Israel as a strategic ally. Neither superpower wanted a regional war, but both amplified the risks. Then, in May 1967, everything shifted. Soviet intelligence warned Egypt that Israel was allegedly preparing to attack Syria. The information was wrong, or at least exaggerated, but Egypt acted as if it were true. Egyptian troops surged into the Sinai Peninsula. United Nations peacekeepers stationed there to prevent conflict were ordered to leave. Then came the decisive move. Egypt closed the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. Israel had long declared this an act of war. At the same time, Egypt signed defense pacts with Jordan and Iraq. Speeches grew louder, threats grew bolder, diplomacy failed. Israel mobilized, but mobilization came at a cost. Factories slowed, civilians were pulled into uniform, the economy strained under the weight of waiting. Israel now faced a choice: wait and risk destruction, or strike first and risk everything. Israel's military doctrine was built on three principles: speed, surprise, and preemption. After intense debate at the highest levels, the decision was made. Israel would strike first. At dawn, Israeli aircraft rose silently into the sky. Within hours, they struck Egyptian airfields with devastating precision. Planes were destroyed on the ground. Runways were cratered. Egypt's air force, once the largest in the Arab world, was effectively neutralized. Jordanian and Syrian airfields were hit next. By the end of the day, Israel controlled the skies. The war had begun, and it was already turning. Israeli ground forces raced across the Sinai. Egyptian command structures collapsed under confusion and miscommunication. Retreats became routes, units scattered. Within days, Israeli troops reached the Suez Canal. An entire front had fallen. Jordan entered the war after receiving false reports of Egyptian victories. The reports were wrong. Israeli forces counterattacked swiftly. By June 7th, the West Bank was captured. Israeli troops entered East Jerusalem. For the first time since 1948, the city came under Israeli control, an event of immense political, religious, and psychological significance. The final front lay to the north. The Golan Heights, a fortified plateau overlooking Israeli territory, had long been a strategic threat. After fierce fighting, Israeli forces broke through. The heights fell. The guns finally began to fall silent. By June 10th, 1967, the war was over. In 6 days, Israel had captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Gaza Strip, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights. The map of the Middle East was transformed, perhaps permanently. But victory did not bring peace. It brought occupation, new conflicts, new grievances, and questions that remain unanswered. The war had ended, but its consequences were only just beginning. If you found this story insightful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because in the next and final part, we uncover the consequences and the long shadows this war left behind.